Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse here on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, and we're here for you. We live in a great country. It's called the United States of America, and it was founded in 1776. But before that, there were colonies, and there were people, and there were great men and women who crafted things, who built things, who accomplished things. One of them is named George Washington. I want to tell you a story about George Washington in 1755, 11 years, good 10 years before we ever heard of him as far as our founding is concerned. But he was a soldier, a British soldier. In 1755, 1,400 British troops marched over the Appalachian Mountains to seize French Fort Duquesne near present-day Pittsburgh. One of the wagon drivers was a 21-year-old Daniel Boone. On July 9, 1755, as they passed through a deep wooded ravine along the Monongahela River, 8 miles south of the fort, they were ambushed by French regulars and Canadians accompanied by Potawatomi and Ottawa Indians. Not accustomed to fighting unless in an open field, over 900 British soldiers were annihilated in what they call the Battle of the Wilderness or Battle of Monongahela. Colonel George Washington rode back and forth during that battle, delivering orders from General Edward Braddock, the commander-in-chief at British forces in America. General Braddock was trying to get his soldiers into a formation typical of European warfare, which tragically made them an open target for the French and Indians who were firing from behind trees. Eventually, Braddock was killed, and every officer on horseback was shot, except for Washington. It was George Washington who carried Braddock from the field. Braddock's field desk was captured, revealing all the British military plans, enabling the French to surprise and defeat British forces in succeeding battles: Fort Oswego, Fort William Henry, Fort Duquesne, Carillon. These British losses convinced the Iroquois tribes and Senecas and Cayugas to switch their allegiance to the French. Before he died, Braddock gave Washington his battle uniform sash, which Washington reportedly carried with him the rest of his life, even while commander-in-chief and president. We see pictures of him with this thing. Washington presided at the burial service of General Braddock as the chaplain was wounded, and General Braddock's body was buried in the middle of the road so as to prevent it from being found and desecrated. Shortly thereafter, writing from Fort Cumberland, George Washington described the Battle of Monongahela to his younger brother, John Augustine Washington, in a letter dated July 18, 1755. It expresses some of his humor. "As I have learned," he wrote, "since my arrival at this place, a circumstantial account of my death and dying speech, I take this early opportunity of contradicting the first and assuring you that I have not yet as composed the latter. But by the all-powerful dispensations of Providence, I have been protected beyond all human probability or expectation. For I had 4 bullets through my coat and 2 horses shot under me, yet escaped unhurt, although death was leveling my companions on every side." Reports of the Battle of Monongahela spread across the country. July 8, 1755, Mary Draper Ingalls had been kidnapped from her home in Draper Meadows, Virginia, by a band of Shawnee. She escaped in midwinter, as recorded in her biography, and trekked nearly 1,000 miles back home. People. At one point during her captivity, she overheard a meeting that the Shawnee had with some Frenchmen. They described in detail the French defeat in the Battle of Monongahela at Duquesne. They described how the Indian chief Red Hawk claimed to have shot Washington 11 times, but did not succeed in killing him. 15 years later, Washington and Dr. Craik, a close friend of his from his youth, were traveling through those same woods near the Ohio River and Great Kanawha River. There they met an old Indian chief who addressed Washington through an interpreter, saying, "I am a chief and ruler over my tribes. My influence extends to the waters of the Great Lakes and to the far blue mountains. I have traveled a long and weary path that I might see the young warrior of the great battle. It was on the day when the white man's blood mixed with the streams of our forests that I first beheld this chief. I called to my young men and said, 'Mark yon tall, daring warrior. He is not of the Redcoat tribe. He hath an Indian's wisdom, and his warriors fight as we do. Himself alone exposed. Quick, let your aim be certain, and he dies.' Our rifles were leveled, rifles which, but for you, knew not how to miss. 'Twas all in vain. A power mightier far than we shielded you. Seeing you were under special guardianship of the Great Spirit, we immediately ceased to fire at you." He went on to say, "I am old, and soon shall be gathered to the great council fire of my fathers in the land of shades. But ere I go, there is something bids me speak in the voice of prophecy. Listen. The Great Spirit protects that man and guides his destinies. He will become the chief of nations, and a people yet unborn will hail him as the founder of a mighty empire. I am come to pay homage to the man who is the particular favorite of heaven and who can never die in battle." An Indian warrior later declared, "Washington was never born to be killed by a bullet." Speaking of himself, he said, "I had 17 fair fires at him with my rifle, and after all could not bring him to the ground." The role of faith and virtue in George Washington's life is apparent in his correspondence during this early period in his career. February 2nd, 1756, in a letter to Governor Dinwiddie, Colonel Washington wrote from Alexandria, Virginia, saying, "I have always, so far as was in my power, endeavored to discourage gambling in camp, and always shall while I have the honor to preside here." In April 1756, in a letter to General Dinwiddie, Colonel Washington wrote from Winchester, Virginia, saying, "It gave me infinite concern to find in yours by Governor Innes that any representation should inflame the Assembly against the Virginia regiment or give cause to suspect the morality and good behavior of the officers. I have, both by threats and persuasive means, endeavored to discountenance gambling, drinking, swearing, and irregularities of every kind, while I have, on the other hand, practiced every artifice to inspire a laudable emulation in the officers for the service of their country, and to encourage the soldiers in the unerring exercise of their duty." Later in June of that year, he issued the following order at Fort Cumberland. It says, "Colonel Washington has observed that the men of regiment are very profane and reprobate. He takes this opportunity to inform them of his great displeasure at such practices, and assures them that if they do not leave off, they shall be severely punished. The officers are desired, if they hear any man swear or make use of any oath or execration, to order the offender 25 lashes immediately, and that without courts martial. For a second offense, he will be more severely punished." In 1756, Washington issued the order, "Any soldier found drunk shall receive 100 lashes without benefit of court martial." In September of that year, he wrote to Dinwiddie again. He said, "The want of a chaplain, I humbly conceive, reflects dishonor on the regiment, as all other officers are allowed. The gentlemen of the corps are sensible of this and propose to support one of their private expense. but I think it would have a more graceful appearance were he appointed as are others. This is a snapshot of the character and the religious commitment of the men who founded this great nation. Much is written that would diminish their religious reputations, largely, I believe, in an effort to discount any or all of God's hand in their efforts. However, these men living in desperate times, under tremendous hardships, suffering great deprivations and loss, held on to their values. Read the final reports of what the signers of the Declaration suffered at the hands of the British. Few of them survived the ordeal without total loss of all they had, including family members. And none of them were perfect. Many of them exhibited flawed character. But the vast number, even Benjamin Franklin, were God-fearing men. As Christian as you or I? Probably not. But I dare say these men had a far better grasp of the Almighty than the vast majority of those who make the claim of salvation today.